What's going on, Cross Life students? Daryl here. Welcome to our Monday meetup. This is not your normal or typical Monday meetup. This is very good. It's going to be a different one. Typically, it's myself and Tommy and maybe Hunter goofing off, having some fun, interacting with you guys in the chat. But in light of recent events, we felt it was very important for us to have a very important conversation with you. If you've been watching the news for any amount of time, you've seen riots, you've seen unrest, you've seen protests, you've seen violence, and just anger and hatred and just emotion being put all out over the world. And all of it really, honestly, has been circling all around the idea of racism. And racism is a very real problem in our society, in our world, in our country, in our community. And we wanted to take the time today to address it and talk about it, and really point people to the gospel through it. So today, as we are talking through this, I want you to know that we don't have an agenda. We don't have a purpose for this video other than letting people know that the gospel can change lives, and the gospel can change perceptions and can change so many different things. But at the same time, we want to honor those that are struggling, those that are hurting right now. The murder of George Floyd most recently kind of spurred a lot of this on, and we mourn with his family. We mourn with the loss of a loved one in that murder that took place. There's no other way to describe it but murder. And we're here to talk about that and just see what we can do as a church and how we can point people towards Jesus. And as I was thinking about this, I thought there were two people that I wanted to have on this conversation with me, and they're right here with me. So if you guys would welcome to my office. This is like Studio A, Daryl's office, but we've got Hunter Bruce right here, our student ministry intern here at Cross Life Church, no stranger to most of you. He's a great dude who loves Jesus, and we're excited to have some conversation and some talk. But then we also have Elijah Barnes over here. He is our one-time intern, then associate, like middle school associate, and then now you're working full-time as the East Campus student pastor, student minister. And so we are just so honored to have these guys with us and to talk about this like weird topic. It's a taboo thing that a lot of people don't really enjoy talking about. I'm going to be the first to tell you that I am white. I know this is like the shock of the nation. Like, this is hard for you guys to wrap your heads around. But I really feel like I have no say in any of this because of my upbringing and my skin color. That's why I wanted to bring you guys in, because I feel like you guys are coming at it from a whole different angle. I'm an outsider looking in, looking at the responses, looking at what's happening in the world. And I have questions, I have struggles, and I wrestle through that. But at the same time, I understand that I'm coming at it from a totally different angle than both of you are. So here's what I wanted to ask you guys was, what is it like being a black man in America? Like, what's it like every day, like waking up in that role, like in that identity, like who you are? Like, it's like, does it change the way that you lived? Is it a conscious decision that you make every day? Like, let's hear from you guys.
I'd say to begin, you have to understand that as a black man, you, despite of the amount of education you have, despite of your amount of work ethic you have, you understand that you might not have the same opportunity as someone else because of your skin color. Right. And the idea of racism didn't just start like just recently. You know, this idea has been going on since slavery. You can go back to slavery and you can understand how they brought African people from Africa to America on slave ships, and under poor conditions. They brought us here, sold us, they took our people, worked them to death, they beat us, and it's been going on like since then. So the thing is that the problem is that like people don't have compassion because they don't understand what it is to be black. And you know, people don't get that, and that's what really is the problem today. So
I mean, I think for me, you know, I've had such a unique upbringing because I mean, I grew up for the first like 10 years of my life, single mom, worked 3 jobs, lived in low income areas because that's all she could afford. You know, I had to stay with my grandparents when she couldn't even afford to keep me in the house to pay bills and all that stuff. But then, you know, halfway through, like at the age of 10, and when my mom passed away, I moved in with my grandparents. And so I was raised like half and half, you know what I mean? And so it's been interesting to kind of be on both sides of that coin, you know? And so for me, I would say to be Black in America is, I feel like I don't have as much clearer vision as some other people. And so it's been recently, I've like started to think about that stuff and begin to think about how I've experienced racism in the world. And for me, I think it's mostly been like people like trying to compliment, but like don't understand it's racist. You know what I mean? Like I had a lot of white friends growing up and their parents were like, you're just not one of those Black people. You know, just like, I see what you're saying, but you know what I mean? Like that's also kind of like a backhanded compliment. And so, you know, like that kind of stuff is what I grew up with. But I think, you know, especially now being married, you know, Kelsey and I have had many conversations with, all right, now like this is a reality, you know. I don't live in a city where everybody knows my parents anymore, you know. So what are some things that I can do to set myself up to not be in a situation where I'm necessarily going to be targeted? I think targeted is a heavy term to use, you know.
Right.
And so there are some things like we've had conversations about it, like how are we going to raise what are we going to do with our kids? You know, our kids are obviously going to be, they could possibly be really dark to possibly being white, you know. I mean, they could be the whole spectrum, you know. And so just talking about, I've never had those conversations, and so it's been interesting to now kind of be waking up in America and thinking, oh, like I have to start thinking about being Black, you know. And so some things I've done is like I started, instead of keeping my registration for my car in my glove box, I keep it like above me, so I don't have to look like I'm reaching for something, you know, and those kinds of things. And I think, I mean, and Kelsey and I have had different conversations. Is like I don't look like a stereotypical Black person. You know what I mean? I mean, I wear glasses. You know, my hair is like curly and not, you know, like Hunter's hair. you know what I'm saying? Like I don't, very different look. You know what I mean? But
Yeah. No,
and so most of the time when people meet me, they're like, "Oh, are you Puerto Rican? Like, are you Hispanic?" You know, and so it's been really interesting beginning to wake up to that reality of I am a Black man in America.
Yeah.
You know, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hunter, you've grown up in kind of 2 different places. You've spent time here in Florida, and then also in New York City, which is one of the hotbeds right now of the unrest. And you have family there still. Have you had a chance to talk to them at all during this time, or has it any communication there? Or?
I mean, loosely. Like I talk to my uncle here and there, my grandparents, my grandma. She still lives in New York, and she goes to the church up in Times Square. And she sent me this video today of Michael Todd, and he was talking about like how like about the racial injustice that goes on, and how he's always has to be conscious. Like, okay, I'm a Black man. Like I have to be aware of what I'm doing in certain situations, so I don't look like I'm like I say a target, but that's like reality. Like that's what it is, you know. So like even like today, like every time I leave the house, my mom always tells me like be careful because you know like I hate to be so like morbid, but they're shooting African American people, so I have to understand like what the situation is.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man.
I mean, there's definitely a level of caution, you know, that you want to like pertain to.
Yeah, no, and here's the thing: like I've never once had to think about that in my life, you know, and that's like that to me. That's sobering. Like that is a sobering thought to think that you have to that thought even crosses your mind, like when you're walking out of your front door.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: like I grew up in a police officer's home. Like my dad is a cop, 28 years, local police department. So I've seen lots of really good cops. My dad was one of the good guys. But I've also seen a lot of guys that you're like, is this really what you want to do? You know? And so like it's been a struggle in the last couple of days for me watching this because I feel like there's been extremism on both sides. Does that make sense? And that's been a struggle for me just to process and what that looks like. And like at the same time, put myself in the shoes of a young African-American male. Like, all right, what is this that you're processing? What is it that you're going through?
And I don't want to say like, I know good police officers.
Oh, yeah,
too.
yeah,
Police
yeah.
officers aren't bad, but like I just feel like some jobs shouldn't have bad apples in it. I feel like a pilot, like you can't be like, oh, like I think I want to land today. Like,
No, I get that. Absolutely. No, and that's, and here's the thing. I want to be very clear to everybody that's watching. Like, I fully support, law enforcement
100%.
and justice. I think that is the biggest thing. And I think as Christians too, like that needs to be one of our cries, is a cry for justice.
Yeah, definitely.
And supporting our fellow mankind.
Yeah.
I struggle. I hesitate to say this just because tensions are so high, but like I hate the idea of like the white race, the African American race, because there is no race.
Yes,
like there's one race, it's the human race.
Yeah.
And I get that, but at the same time, I don't want to discredit a movement and a struggle that a certain type of person is going through, or a certain ethnicity is going through.
People,
But I don't know. I struggle a lot. Like, and just this last week, like I've been watching, and my youngest daughter is adopted, and she's Thai. She's not African. She doesn't have that tone skin, but she's darker. And especially since we moved to Florida, she gets a lot more sun here than she did in Alaska. But like in my mind, I'm running through the process. Like, do I have to have a conversation with her because she's going to look different, and those types of things? Like I don't know. Like that's a real problem. I think that I never once processed until recently, until like the last couple days, watching the news and listening. For the first time, I think I just shut up and listened a whole lot.
Yeah.
Like I'm just listening to cries, listening to it, trying to see through the muck, and listen to the heart of the protest, rather than the violence that is being spurred on top of it. I don't know. It's just it's an interesting dichotomy to live in, and to try and process. What are some of your guys' thoughts? Like, what do you think we as a church, as a body of believers, not just Cross Life, but just Christians as a whole, what can we do to help fight this? Like it's a bigger problem than just us. We know it's a sin issue. Like there's more to it, but what can we do as Christians? Like, what are some thoughts there?
I'd say be willing to, like I said earlier, to be willing to have compassion and understand the heart and the protests, what's going on. Because a lot of people don't really understand what's going on because they're not African American people. They're not like, they don't have to go against, or they don't have to face racism, And so be willing to have those conversations to really truly get in depth and to really see where they're coming from. So I'd say that. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, as Christians, we're called with like any injustice to really just stand in the gap. Does that make sense? And something I keep thinking of is we're supposed to be lights. We're called to be lights into the world and live like Christ. And so one thing is like at East, we're going through a sermon series on Sunday called Exiles. It's kind of fitting, talking about exiles, like we're exiles on earth, like our eventual home is heaven, but even talking about that difference of groups, and called to live with gentleness and called to live with respect. So I think as a Christian now more than ever is the time to do that. Is a time to live with gentleness, is a time to live with respect towards people who have different opinions, and to kind of stand in that gap there. And I think, and something I keep thinking of is, in Matthew 5, Christ says, be a light like a city on a hill, don't be hidden. And so I think now more than ever is to live up to what we're supposed to be as Christians, and to not shy away from that, to not think or not react and not do anything out of fear, but to do it with gentleness and respect. So I think that's different from a bunch of different churches. I think for us, I think it's a great thing to have conversation. I think it's really important. I'm really proud of the global church as a whole for stepping up and actually saying something and doing something. I love how, you know, a lot of churches have gone after in the aftermath of the riots and in the aftermath of the protests and cleaned up and prayed for people and just gone and prayed for different parts of the city. That's awesome. And so I love that. And I think anymore now the church is a platform for inclusivity, a platform for peace, a platform for people to be heard.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's I don't know. Like as I was watching this weekend and like just again watching the news, watching church services, listening, I did a lot of listening this weekend. And I came across an interview with a pastor with another one of his friends, and he brought up a super recognizable verse that's found in Galatians. It's in Galatians chapter 3, starting in verse number 25. It says this: "But now that faith has come, we are no longer under a guardian. For in Christ Jesus, you are all sons of God through faith. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male nor female. For you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise." I love what Paul is saying here, but also I want to hear from you guys. Like when you hear that phrase, like there is neither Greek nor Jew, no slave or free, but all are under God. Like we're all seen as equal.
Yeah.
At that level. And there's no male, no female. And if we were to continue this in the current culture, there is no white, there is no black, there is no Hispanic, there is no, like all these things. Like in God's eyes, we're all His, and we're all created in His image. We're all His image bearers. In the midst of what's going on in our world, how do we put this into action?
Yep. I think a super cool thing is that I've heard a pastor say recently is, now is not the time to not see color, but now's the time to see color and embrace it and celebrate it.
Yeah.
And so I think for that, and which I love now, is we live in a time where churches are more multicultural than ever before.
Yeah.
Sure, there's still some subdivision, but more than ever, it's multicultural. And so I think, for that, maybe that looks like churches coming together as one voice and one body in a city and holding a prayer night together or holding a worship night together. Something where you come together as one body and one voice saying like, this isn't right, but we're going to pray and we're going to do something about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's at least off the top of my head what I can think of.
I agree. I'd say definitely is a time where we all need to come together and not be like separated for sure. Like I said, like a lot of churches we live in a time where like a lot of churches are like multicultural.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that all the people of the church come together and like really strengthen each other and lift each other up during this time.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I don't know. I just the idea of viewing people as the image bearer.
That's awesome.
We every single one of us is created in God's image. But then the tension in that is we need to love each other as if they are God's image, right?
Yeah.
And we need to respect each other as if we were created in God's image, and we need to treat each other in a way that honors that position and that identity that's found in Christ, right? And that could be hard.
No, for sure.
That can be a very difficult thing when we don't see eye to eye. When there is hurt and when there is pain and when there is suffering, and scars and history and those as you were talking earlier, Hunter, like the idea of the African population being brought here for a specific purpose, and that's the history of African Americans for the most part. Rooted. Like that is how most family bloodlines got here. At that point, like that's going to be a heavy hurdle to get through, and I think as a white individual, as a Caucasian Christian, I need to be patient and understand that, and I think that's just so important. that we as a church, we as a ministry, we as individuals, as human beings, understand that not everybody is coming at their situation from the same direction.
Right.
We all have issues. We all have struggles. We all have problems that we've been wrestling through. And some are deeper than others, and some are deeper rooted than others.
Right.
And it's going to take time, but it's not impossible either.
Definitely.
There's a pastor friend of mine named Jeff, and I was just watching the video. I think I shared the video with you, Elijah. And it's this idea of, he's an African American pastor here in Florida, and he doesn't serve in an African American church. He serves in a very multicultural church.
Yeah.
And he said that at one point I forget the exact phrase, but it was something along the lines of, there's a difference between your identity and your ethnicity.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's okay to have your ethnicity and your pride in your ethnicity, and like to be a proud Black man, and to be a proud, white European American, like however I want, like whatever label I want to throw on myself, right? Like the Swedish, Dutch, Welsh, and German pride that oozes from me, right? But then to have your identity is two different things.
Right.
It's not to forget your ethnicity, because that is who you are and it's where you came from, but that idea of our identity being rooted in Christ and being rooted as being a follower of Christ first.
Yeah.
And I think that changes perspective for a lot of things. And I think that changes the conversation a little. But again, it's hard. This isn't like a light switch type situation.
Yeah.
If it were, we would have fixed this a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
And I just want our ministry and our church and our family, like my family, I want us to be those that are seen as partners, people that are there, that are supportive and doing whatever we can. But I'm going to be honest, like I was hesitant to speak out. Like I should be
It's a scary
like
thing.
totally like I'm going to be 100% transparent, and here's why. I'll give you a couple reasons why. First off, I'm a white guy.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be like, here's my fears, like here,
as
valid as they were, if they were or not. Like I was scared that
Absolutely.
I'd be ostracized for making a statement. My words might be twisted and used against me. My father being a police officer, like if I say one thing about a police brutality, am I going to offend my dad and his coworkers that I grew up with? Like, am I going to do like this and this? And then, like, honestly, the longer I stewed in it, the more I realized I cannot be silent. Like, it is a race issue, but it's an evil issue first.
For sure.
Like, this is a sin issue through and through. Like, George Floyd was murdered by an evil man who happened to be a cop. Does that make sense? Like that's the way I've had to come to terms with it. Like it was, and it's just
a humanity issue.
And so for me, it's been a hard thing. Like I want, like just being 100% real. Like I want to be fully supportive, and do everything I can to help. But I feel like I don't know what I can or should do.
And I mean, it's hard because you're right. Like we live in a day and age where everybody can voice their opinion freely everywhere. And so
I think that the fact that you're willing to have us on the show today and really speak from our experience is a start. That's it. You're in the right place.
That's it. That was my thought. Is not. I'm not patting myself on the back in any way, shape, or form, but I wanted to get the conversation started. I wanted us to know that it was open, but I also wanted our students and their families to know where we stand as a church. Like we will not stand for injustice. Like we will not allow it to happen. We are going to fight for, the gospel to be proclaimed, everything, because that's ultimately our goal. Like honestly, like we stand for justice and we stand for the right things to be done, because we know what the right thing really is.
Right.
Like we know what's supposed to be right because we have it right here. in Scripture, and we want the principles that are in Scripture to be broadcasted from this place and from our lives, and the love that's expressed in here, the guidance that's expressed in here. We want that played out in our lives. What are where do you see this going? That's a loaded question and a scary question, because I feel like this could go so many different directions.
Yeah.
But like, if you were to like write the script for the next 2 weeks,
Okay. Yeah.
and like this miraculous something takes place, like, where do you see it? Like, what do you want to see happen through all this?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Kelsey and I talk about it a lot. So, it's been interesting because a lot of what we've talked about is a lot of it is not, some of it is legislation based. Some of it is very much like they should have really been prosecuted, sooner and probably a little bit more severely, for what they've done and for not doing anything, and same thing with the guy who filmed, Arbery, like that, those kinds of things. And so there are some prosecution things there that are in legislation things I think can be dealt with. But I think, at least how I think the way the core issue gets solved is more people opening their eyes to that there is a problem, one, still. And they open their eyes not only to explicit racism, but implicit racism. Does that make sense? Like when I was talking earlier, like, you're just not one of those guys. Like, and like that's what implicit. You know what I mean? Right. It's not something you think of, but starting to open your eyes to that, and then having true conversation about it and being open to change. Because I think when you open your eyes, you have to be able to evaluate yourself, and do some deep reflection, and then conversation from there, and pass that on to the next generation, and being willing to say, hey, like, me and my generation got it wrong. Like, our parents were worse than us, but that doesn't mean we're way better, Right. And so I think that's the one way we can begin to solve that implicit and explicit issue, outside of just legislation. Because I feel like that the pain now is that it's still going on despite rules being put in place and despite systematic things being gone. There's still the cultural and societal rules that are happening. And so I think beginning to break those down is what I would hope would happen over the next few weeks, months, years.
There's a phrase that I've heard for years, and it's, you can't legislate morality.
Right.
People like, there has to be a culture shift, I think. And I think people need to be able to look across the table and see someone that looks different than them, but realize that they're exactly the same.
Yeah, right.
And that's one thing that I appreciate about you guys, is your love, first off, for the Lord, and then for our students, even though, let's be honest, most of them don't look like you guys. Like, if we're being real, like, but I think it comes back to this world needs Jesus now more than ever. Not to say that the world before us didn't need Jesus, but I think short of Christ stepping down and like snapping his fingers and like calling us all to repentance.
And that's the responsibility we have, like, right, as the church and as students mainly. I mean, you're the next generation who gets to set the definition of what society and what things are going to look like. So when we as student pastors and teachers say, like, you have the power to change the community, and that you're ambassadors and carriers of the gospel, it's true. We're not just saying that because we believe in you. We're saying that because that's the truth, and you really do have power to dictate these things and to cause that culture shift. And so, I think.
Go ahead.
Okay. And I'd say, like, off of what Elijah said, I'd say definitely open your eyes to what's going on. A lot of people don't like to talk about the subject because it makes them feel uncomfortable, or they turn their back to because they don't like what's going on, or they don't really see it. But like, make sure you're having like those conversations with your friends, and make sure you talk to like other people that don't look like you. I'd say, And like sometimes, most of the times, like certain people don't like talk about it because they benefit from the type of race that they are in America. You know, they don't get the same, they don't see the same, they don't really get it. Exactly. They don't have to experience the same challenges and hurdles that African Americans or other races have to. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. Yesterday morning, Pastor Tim spoke for Oviedo campus here, and he made a statement. It was dealing specifically with marriage and like the husband and the wife's roles, but I think it translates here. The illustration that he used, the idea of being a thermostat rather than a thermometer.
100%.
And I think as students and even as adults, we have the opportunity right now to change a culture and to shift the culture and adjust what's going on around us and influence what's going on around us. Like a thermostat sets the temperature, and everything else reacts. The thermometer just tells you what the temperature is. Like there's a difference between walking into a situation and going, "Wow, that's not right," but then walking away and not doing anything about it.
Right.
If you see injustice, if you see racism, like in your school and your family, speak up, like address it. Recognize it and talk about it. Like, let's be those that are changing the culture across the board. Like, I would love to be a part of the generation that snuffs out racism.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
For sure.
Like that would be amazing to be a part of that. And again, I don't think it's a light switch solution. It's going to take time. It's going to take just years and years of reprogramming of people's thoughts. But it starts with us. It starts with us being the change and treating people the way that we want to be treated. Imagine that, like scripture.
Wow.
Like, love people like you want to be loved, and love like God loved you first, and see what change will take place.
I mean, which is awesome because it's like you read the Bible and like Christ broke barriers without even thinking about it. I mean, like he just kind of did it. You know, talking. I mean, all the time the one that comes up is his interaction with the Samaritan woman. Like typically you would walk around that whole area, but he's like, yeah, no, we're gonna walk straight through it. You know, and not only did he just walk straight through it, which was already a big statement enough, but he stopped and had a conversation and spent time and
absolutely
talked about it. And I mean, addressed not only the issue of Samaritan, but the issue of talking to a woman and the issue of her past and all of that. And so you can't, as Christ imitators, we can't be afraid to step into an issue and talk about it and have a real conversation.
Because Christ is always willing to shake things up. You know?
It's such a peaceful way. In a way where it's like, which I keep referring back to 1 Peter, but that's just because I just preached on it, so it's fresh in my mind. You know, but you know, and that's what Peter writes in 1 Peter 3, and he says, you know, if you do this in gentleness and respect, you know, and you do what is righteous, then who can make you suffer for what is good? You know, who can come against you and not look stupid? It's pretty much what he says, right? Like, and so there's a way to do it without being disrespectful, without being harsh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Have you guys been watching the news? Obviously, like you've kind of been seeing what's going on. If you could make one plea to just the general population, like whether it be the protesters, the bystanders that aren't really saying much, or maybe it's the victims, like whatever it is, like if there's one thing, like one statement that you can make, what would you say?
Yeah, it's so hard. I think, and this is what I was talking to a student about the other day, that we can't see the two radical parts of each situation and assume those are the whole. You know what I mean? Because what that does, that just incites fear. And fear causes more radicalness. So that makes sense. And so I think, I mean, and that's what I love. I love like the people seeing the positive videos, like the video of I think it was the police commissioner in Michigan. Was that what it was? Who was like, hey, like we're here just like to walk with you. Like I had my guys put the right stuff down, you know, and what he was doing was just taking away that fear factor and saying like, hey, like we're here to elevate your voice, you know, not to quell it. And so I love that. I guess I didn't really answer your question. But. I don't know. It's so hard
It's all
to come
good.
up with one thing.
No,
to address
absolutely.
everybody.
No, I get it. It's fine.
I'd say don't let the media and division and the
Yeah, that's
news
good.
cause let you or don't let it cause division in your life. And like you understand that like we're called to be one people. You know, we're not called to be two different parts. You know, we're all one people for Christ and in God's body. So don't let the media make it seem like it's one side versus the other. Like we're all fighting against sin and evil, and that's what God has called us to do and be like lights for Him.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And you said something a few minutes ago, Elijah, that I want to touch on and just cover because I feel like it's an important thing. If you've been watching the news, you've seen a variety of types of protests. Some that are super peaceful and they're just walking and making their voice heard. Others have maybe gone to City Hall and just stood in silence, you know, in an exercise of their right and fully support that. Like that is that is your constitutional right to do those things. But we've also seen the extreme aspect of that, and some people have taken advantage of the opportunity to turn it violent and turn it into a crime. You know, it takes it past that constitutional right of peaceful protest to a riot. I mean, for a lack of a better term. And my struggle in this has been like I feel for those that are doing it the right way. Because their message is being clouded
100%.
by those that are not doing it the right way. So for those of you that are hurt, that are struggling, like I want you to know that we hear you, like we see you, we understand. Well, we don't understand, but we're trying. Like, we're trying to wrap our heads around it, and we want to support you as much as we can, and be praying. And we're here, and we stand with you guys in this struggle. But my plea is that we do it in the right way. And especially if you're a believer, like honor Christ in the way that you do it. Like there's been some really good videos and pictures floating around of some of these, like where prayer is breaking out. Like I was almost in tears the other night. I saw like a montage of like white police officers hugging African American protesters and praying together and like saying, "Hey, we're here for you." Like we're not the enemy, and I think that is just so important that we also see that side of it as well, and we open our eyes to the whole picture, not just like you said, what the media cuts up. There was a picture just the other day, and I saw it earlier in the morning. And it was a cropped picture, and it had a bunch of rioters or protesters like circled up around an officer who was by himself, and he was in his riot gear. Well, that same picture came out 6 hours later, panned back more, and the protesters, they weren't really rioters. The protesters were actually surrounding him, protecting him from those who were rioting. You know, and like the media can twist things like to make you think one thing or another. So be slow to speak and like soak it in and listen. And if you know someone that's different than you, like talk to them.
Violence is not the answer. Like I can see, like I can reason with that. I understand where they're coming from.
Frustration.
Like, the frustration, because it's been happening for a long time, this kind of stuff. But like hate can't drive out hate. You know, only love can do that. So
you already pay good for evil.
No, absolutely. Well, guys, listen, we appreciate you guys coming and taking time out of your day to share your heart a little bit and share with our students. And you guys are no stranger to Cross Life students at all. And I thought it would be great for them to hear from people that they know rather than just some random video clips from the news. You know, like I wanted them to see and hear from you guys. So I appreciate you more than you'll ever know coming in and sharing with us. Students, just a couple quick reminders before we go. Both of these guys are going to be involved in it, but we have our conference coming up in July. July 8, 9, and 10. It's going to be awesome. Make sure you're registering if you haven't registered already. We have some really fun things planned. We're putting the finishing touches on some of the big parts of it, and we'll be releasing those here in the coming days and weeks. So make sure you guys stay locked in on that. Also, don't forget Wednesday night. We would love to have you guys join us right here on this YouTube channel for our Wednesday night live. It's been a lot of fun. We're having a good time. Last week we did a little panel discussion as well with me, you, and Tommy. Tommy is alive. I know some of you guys might be wondering, like, in the office, there's only so much room.
Yeah.
And it was important that these two guys ended up in here. But we love you, Tommy. And he wanted to be a part of this. It was a difficult flow to make it work. But we are looking forward to Wednesday night and hanging out with you guys again. Also, don't forget this Sunday, we are starting our live worship services here at the Oviedo campus. And I think you guys are starting tomorrow for the East Campus.
Yeah, tomorrow.
So that's going to be awesome. So make sure you guys are here. If you are part of the Oviedo campus and you come to church here on Sunday with your family at either 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock, find Tommy and I. We'll have some custom face shields.
Yeah, keep mine in my car.
Cross-Life students face shields, man.
Nice,
they're actually really nice.
Like I wore it to Disney Springs the other day,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah,
I wasn't
was
dying,
really
man. Like it was like this is actually semi-comfortable.
Yeah.
So make sure you guys are hanging out with us. Come by, say hi. We just want to see you face to face. We miss you so much. We can't wait to get back to normal. Again, thank you guys for this conversation. I know it's not under the best circumstances to talk like this, and it's a shame that it took something like this for us to have these conversations. But let's keep these conversations going.
Yeah, I was saying these are being had.
Let's not stop these conversations. Let's keep them going and make sure that we do what we can, guys, to be the thermostat in our society, and let's change the culture. Let's love those that are around us, see everybody as image bearers, and we'll move forward, and God will get the glory in this all anyway, and the gospel will be proclaimed. All right, guys, we love you. We'll see you guys later. Have a great week.
See you guys.